Mike Levin on Thursday, July 1st, 2021. And I thought I'd spin a little thought experiment by you to see if you too can understand the anti-gravity propulsion system of the Tic Tac UFOs and why it's actually amazing that we just don't have it ourselves in everyday life and why it's coming to us through mystery drones or whatever. So, perhaps you're familiar with how an electromagnet works. You take a wire and you coil it up and you put a steel rod through it and you apply an electric current to the wire, the coil, and then the steel rod becomes a magnet. By the electromagnetic field of the coil is inducing all the magnetic polar regions that are normally scrambled and misaligned within the steel beam to all point in the same direction, and voila, it's a magnet. There would be a magnetic field there even without the steel beam from just the coil, but the steel beam really dramatically demonstrates that you can induce magnetism into almost anything. Everything is magnetic, or the universe would fall apart into dust. So, another thing you might have seen is quantum phase locking, or just quantum locking. It's a bit newer than electric magnets. It's the stuff you see on YouTube, and you could do it at home. It's easily done. It's now, not even just high school physics. It's birthday party physics. Order yourself a little ceramic superconductor. They're not room temperature superconductors. You got to cool them down, so you got to get your hand on some liquid nitrogen as well. Pour the liquid nitrogen on the superconducting disc and put a permanent magnet. It isn't done normally with electromagnets because that's so heavy and has so much apparatus. But if you take a tiny neodymium or ceramic permanent magnet of the refrigerator magnet variety, bring it close to that superconducting disc, it will not only levitate over the disc, it will lock in place, orientation and all. You could take a pair of tongs, because the disc is very cold, pick it up and turn it upside down, and that disc would remain floating in the same location relative to the disc, right down to the orientation. That's the locking of quantum phase locking. It has something to do with the, imperfection of quantum fluctuations or something. I'm no particle physicist, but from an experimental standpoint, this is just, everyday stuff. Okay. So you got your electromagnet on the one hand, you got quantum phase locking on the other, right? You accept that those two things exist. Now, let's put them together, okay? Now, it's worth noting that when you do this levitation trick between superconductors and magnets, you can reverse their roles. You could have a magnetic disk on the bottom and a little superconductor on the top. It's just we don't do that because in today's state of superconductors, you don't do that. It comes in these ceramic disks. That's the experiment. And it'd be weird to cool a tiny little so if, say for example, the magnet were the big part and the superconductor were the small part, you could pick up the magnet with it. Well, you wouldn't need tongs. You just pick it up with your fingers and move the magnet, and the superconductor would stay quantum phase locked relative to the magnet. Okay. Now, imagine for a moment that by having a sufficiently strong electromagnetic field, just like that coil, right? This is nothing wackadoo, just it has to be really strong in a local area, putting, I say a few gigawatts of power that would be required to run a small city into a microwave emitter that would do the trick, that you reflect back and forth and hopefully get some resonance effects. So the power of that electromagnetic field would ramp up the same way a singer hitting a harmonic can break a glass, or soldiers marching over a suspension bridge can accidentally collapse it. Hitting a harmonic can ramp up the power of a frequency. So you ramp up the power of your electromagnetic field so very high that you can magnetize the empty space right there. How can you magnetize empty space? Because of virtual particles and the quantum foam. All particles are virtual. Let's get that out of the way. It's just some are more virtual than others because they're popping in and out of existence as if a light drizzle falling in 3D space all around us, hence the name quantum foam. It's like carbonation or something. It's a twinkling all around us. It's believed to be real. A fair amount of science is behind the fact now. There's a little bit of controversy in that the van der Waals force, forces between polarized particles, is responsible for the Casimir force, but there's cross-verification now going on that virtual particles exist, which is really just, if you can imagine, little pings against a membrane. The pings are energy, okay, because energy are particles, particles are energy equals mc squared. All matter is really energy. And particles are when energy hits a quantum field. So just think about things pinging on a trampoline. It's like the example with a bowling ball in the middle of the trampoline to demonstrate the curvature of space-time. A similar mental experiment can show you how particles exist by energy hitting the trampoline, as if sometimes pushed against it with a stick and you'll have a permanent particle, or shot against it lightly as if from a BB gun or something, and that's your virtual particle. So we don't really know where the energy is coming from, but we're pretty sure it's happening. These virtual particles can be magnetized. They can be polarized. They can all be pointing in the same direction under such a massive electromagnetic field as the one I described. Now, as opposed to the quantum locking birthday party experiment, which has objects relative to each other that can be easily moved because you can pick them up and move them, you can't pick up and move when you do that to the empty vacuum of space. It has a fixed location. In fact, that fixed location is not right there in front of you as you would expect it to be, because one, they pop in and out of existence so fast. Two, because the Earth itself is spinning around its axis, and then the whole Earth is orbiting around the sun, and then we're expanding in an apparently expanding universe. So is the moment you magnetize something, it starts zooming away from you. Not that it can even zoom because it exists for so little time, because velocity is distance over time. These virtual particles are the smallest thing we believe knowable at this point. 1 Planck size and 1 Planck duration in lifespan. And a Planck unit is the smallest theoretical thing we know. It's about the same as a photon. So it's like a photon that has a little bit of mass, has the same energy as a photon, but exists for much briefer than a photon does. That's a virtual particle. So how do we even know we can magnetize them, polarize them? Because we can do it with photons, such similar particles. So you'd have to do it at the moment it comes into existence, but the field's already there from your field generator. And it lasts for the entire duration the thing exists. And when it goes away, of course, it's not there with a magnetic effect. Its magnetic effect is gone again. But there's so many of these virtual particles around you that when you do it, you create a fixed point in space, which if you brought a superconductor near, now you remember your field generator keeps going, probably some powerful computers are in the picture to compensate for the Earth's movement. But if you can generate a field, a magnetized quantum foam field, it is not in a location relative to your field generator. It's in a fixed location in space relative to the universe. So you bring your superconductor near that, bam. Your superconductor is fixed there in its location. If your superconductor happens to be connected to your power generator, that whole apparatus just hovers there in space in the same quantum phase locking phenomenon that you can do at your next kid's birthday party. In fact, note to self, I want to do that. But the role of the magnet is played by the empty vacuum of space. superconductor is played by some superconductor. You have to have nearby your microwave emitter and power source that powers the microwave emitter. So you have to carry with you some sort of power source. You need some way of making that microwave emission, or whatever EM radiation you're using, ramped up so incredibly high that, and in a local space, a really condensed space, that it can not quantize, using quantum effects, so that it can polarize, magnetize, align, get the same spin on, get the same quantum state of every virtual particle that's popping in and out of existence in the vicinity of that electromagnetic field you're generating. Hence, contrary to all the debunkers saying electromagnetism has nothing to do with gravity, you can't create gravity waves, you can't bend gravity, it would take the power of a black hole to do that. Yes, you're all right. We're not doing anything with gravity. We're just doing that high school science experiment where we're, creating well, you're not creating the magnetic field in that. The magnetic field is already there. Only thing you're doing is you're getting your superconductor superconductive. If you had room temperature superconductive, you'd have, relative to each other's objects, quantum phase lock and levitation. Levitation would be all around us as a everyday phenomenon. So as soon as we have room temperature superconductivity, we also have, ho-hum magnetic trails and friction-free tires or whatever kind of stuff like that. It's pretty miraculous, but not nearly as miraculous as if one of those sides of the quantum phase locking equation could take place in a fixed location in midair, mid-vacuum of space, mid-ocean, whatever have you. You can do this anywhere, which is part of the, stunningness of the claims that are being made about the capability of these Tic Tac drones and the propulsion system thereof. But there you have it. I hope I gave you a quick, brief thought experiment as to why this stuff that has been speculated at as far back as the late 1950s, as quantum mechanics was coming online and we were starting to accurately predict all the phenomenon of existence, and ushered in the digital electronics era because of these predictions being so accurate. It seems to be very true, and so it would seem to be very true that this quantum foam and these virtual particles are real, and if they're real, they're magnetizable and polarizable just like any other particles, and if they are, then the final part of the trick is to have something that can produce such powerful contained local electromagnetism as to make that happen, because that becomes something you can hang on to and hover. You can push off against it. You can use all those powerful computers that's compensating for the Earth's movement to manipulate where and how, the direction you're creating this electromagnetic field, and move. It's a small trick, the same general tricks as we use to get from electromagnetism to magnetic levitation trains, maglev trains. 1970s and 1980s technologies use the same basic field alternation. There's various ways. You got to leave it to an engineer. But once you have quantum phase locking against the empty vacuum of space, it's a small step to get magnetic railways in space. And there's the propulsion system of your Tic Tac UFOs. They're not really, doing inertial mass reduction, even like the patents labels say. I think that's a misnomer. It's creating magnetic highways in space with quantum phase locking, and then traveling along it by manipulating the magnetic field in various ways. Maybe you have multiple EM emitters inside this thing, and turning them on and off. I don't know, changing where they point or their orientation. The rest of the story is how you get such a large power source to power these things, and that's that's another story. The patents cover that as well, but my videos have been so long and rambling lately, I think I'm just going to stop it there. Google yourself up some quantum locking, watch those YouTube videos, internalize the fact that it's no longer unusual, it's no big thing, it's an everyday effect. And then tell yourself that we believe right now in the state of science that there is a quantum foam, the equivalent of that steel rod of the electromagnetic, experiment, fact of life. It's everything. It's solenoids and relays. We just know it works. It exists. It powers our modern age. So the same thing that powers our modern age, electromagnetism, and that can create a magnetic effect within steel. The steel will have its role played by all space around you. Space-time is potentially magnetic because it's composed of particles, no matter how brief-lived, because you can apply effects to them en masse, and you are not subject to the bootstrap dilemma that keeps you from being able to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. There's a couple of things. There's also something about friction, that you're not encountering superfluid-like effects where there's no friction between fields. So, you got to take, on face value, you just intuitively got to see these things, that friction exists. In fact, quantum locking proves that friction exists. And then the other part of it is that the field you generate is not in a fixed location relative to your field generator, or else the thing would come crashing to the ground. It's got to be in a fixed position relative to space-time itself, so that you can have friction against it, thus creating traction and a road in space. You create friction gives you traction, you follow that road. You're just whoosh, taking off at Mach speeds, making hairpin turns on a dime. There is no aerodynamic limitations you face. You just almost digitally change the direction you want to go, which would account for the Tic Tacs being 90-degree turns on a hairpin that Commander Fravor had witnessed from his F-18 Hornet off the coast of San Diego, deployed from the U.S. Nimitz, as he gave his interview on 60 Minutes accounting for it. It's all, easily explainable in technology that is not merely, feasible, but sci-fi fans like myself are pretty pissed we don't already have already. The quantum crew of the 50s said it should be there. Experiments in 1997 demonstrated that this force probably is very real. Subsequent experiments have further, supported that this effect is very real, and that should move things from TR2. Whereas, it's probably real. It's in the speculated formulas have teeth behind it, and you can start getting experimental results in the lab, which can be prepped for TR3, bringing it into more operable prototypes that you can start making patents on and stuff. That process should have, in a sci-fi way of thinking about things, started in 1977 with a success-assured moment, just like the Wright brothers when they took the Bernoulli fluid dynamic equations that were converted to the lift equation. That's from the 1750s to the early 1900s. It took from Bernoulli fluids to aerodynamic lift, but soon thereafter, the Wright brothers and the Wright sister, give credit where it's due, brought that to the first human to flight in Kitty Hawk. So it really shouldn't take too long between theory being verified, TR2, to going to technological readiness in prototypes, TR3, and then all the way up through, ready for everyday use, TR10. It not only could have happened, it should have happened by now. where are our flying cars? So I hope that was a fun little thought experiment. I hope you see how anti-gravity is not as wackadoo as it seems, and is not even the anti-gravity that all the, warp field people and gravity field projection people, even Harv Laser is in that category.
In a quarter mile, keep right to stay on US 209 North. Follow signs for I-80 East, Stroudsburg.
Yeah, okay, so my rides basically up. You had to get the GPS interrupting me at least once. And yeah, that's my final thought. This stuff is not...
Keep right to stay on US 209 North.
This stuff is not as wackadoo as you think, okay? It doesn't...
Continue for 4 miles.
It doesn't take the extreme Star Trek-y stuff. It only takes a little bit of Star Trek-y stuff. And the Star Trek-y stuff is proven, nearly proven. You can Google a little. Some people think the van der Waals force doesn't require quantum foam to account for our observations, but there's also the measurement of the electromagnetic field of a single electron that has further verified quantum foam probably exists. But anyway, I'll leave it there because I could ramble forever, and my videos lately have had too much rambling. Definitely subscribe, thumbs up, leave comments. I'm interested in your thoughts, and maybe in some videos soon I'll actually do that quantum phase locking thing to just have some visuals making these same points. Where's my anti-gravity drive? I want to fly that thing. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe.